I am so grateful to be able to share my poems and writings with you. And I also want to thank you for your encouraging comments and your prayers. This week's work took a little bit longer because of the research that I had to do. So I'll be speaking on several issues, but bear with me. I'll tie it all together with the closing poem. Last time I spoke on the middle passage, and I wear my African attire to honor those who survived the cruel crossing over, but also those who did not survive. The thousands who suffocated in the hull of the ship and were tossed overboard, or even those who jumped overboard to get away from such inhumane treatment. So I wear my African attire not only to honor those who survived, but those who didn't. In the intro to Black History in the Making, the last reason I said we should continue to celebrate Black history is to remember and to know who we are and to whom we belong. Now, we've been called a lot of names: colored, Negro, mulatto, African American, Black, and the N-word. There was a time when nobody wanted to be called Black. In fact, those were fighting words. And nobody wanted to be associated with the country of Africa. And we at no time at all were the N-word. And let's deal with that, especially for our young people. Whenever the N-word is used as a racial slur, like in the locker rooms, whoa, maybe not just for my young people, but for the adult athletes. Whenever the N-word is used as a racial slur in the locker room, it's time to educate. It's time to let them know you know who you are. Simply say, the word is Niger, Niger, Niger. My ancestors were kidnapped from the Niger Valley in West Africa. Your ancestors knew that and added another G to make it ugly. So that says a whole lot about you. And it lets you know I know who I am. And let me add this. We are not monkeys. We never have and never will be monkeys. The Word of God said that He created everything according to His kind. Fruit according to His kind. Seed according to His kind. Creatures in the waters according to their kind. Birds, beasts, according to their kind. Cattle on the hills, according to their kind. Creeping things within the earth, according to their kind. And God said, that's good. So we are not monkeys, and neither did we descend from monkeys. My ancestors were created. They did not evolve. And let me say this as a sidebar. Whenever you point a finger at somebody, remember, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. And whatever you say about that person or thing can and probably already is being turned around and said about you. Think about it. Think about it. We not only must know who we are, but we must know to whom we belong. Last presentation, I quoted from the 14th verse of the 139th Psalm. But verses 15 through 18 describe our beginning relationship with God. David said, My frame was not hidden when I was made in secret, when I was woven together in the depths. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days of my life were written in your book before I ever came to be. How precious are your thoughts unto me, O God! How great is the sum of them, greater than the number of sands. When I lay down, you were there. When I awake, you are still with me. We belong to God. And as Mama Mim would say, hear me now. Hear me now. We belong to God. And God not only maintains, but he sustains all of his creations. So now we know who we are and we know to whom we belong. I would like to expound upon two words. Hue, H-U-E, and race, R-A-C-E. Hue pertains to color, like shades of blue, shades of brown. And race is a designated category, not a concept. In fact, the idea did not appear until the 15th century. That's when we were arbitrarily placed into categories according to man's hypothetical reasoning. Red, yellow, black, and white. But according to God's plan, there are no categories or concepts, only opposites. Everything God created had an opposite. God's plan, founded and grounded on his wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, resulted in righteousness. Man's plan created division and resulted in racial inequity and social injustice. Wherever you find a black man, you are going to find social injustice. So, we see man's plan in action all day, every day. So, let's explore God's plan. In the very first verse of the Bible, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. How many times have I read that verse and even memorized it? But I never noticed that the beginning of space and time began with opposites. The beginning began with opposites. Continuing with the creative process, moving down to verse 3, it says that God was surrounded by nothing but darkness. So he spoke to the darkness and he said, let there be light. And there was light. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day, thus completing the creation of the heavens and the earth and establishing a pattern of opposites. In verse 6, God said, let there be a firmament to separate the waters above from the waters beneath. And God called the firmament sky. And the evening and the morning were the second day. Opposite. In verse 10, God gathered all of the waters into one place. And the waters he called seas, and the dry ground he called land. He also created green grass, herb bearing seed, trees bearing fruit, and marshes bearing reeds. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Opposites. In verses 14 through 16, God created greater and lesser lights. Lights to designate signs, seasons, days, months, and years. The greater light, the sun, he created to rule the day. And the lesser lights, the moon and the stars, to rule the night. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Continuing to verse 20. God's creative power produced fowl and birds in the sky and great whales to swim in the ocean. And he commanded them to multiply. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Opposites. On the sixth day, God created all kinds of living things, cattle on the hills, creeping things in the earth, and wild animals. And God saw that it was good. Then in verse 6 of the second chapter of Genesis, God caused a mist to spring up from the ground, and it watered the whole earth. Then he proceeded with the very pinnacle of his creation. He said, "Let us create man in our image and likeness, and let him rule over the air, the land, and the sea, and give him dominion over all creation." So God created man from the dust of the ground. Male and female created he them. He blessed them and commanded them to be fruitful and multiply. Then God looked around and saw everything he had made, and it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day, thus culminating the creative process, but also establishing the pattern of opposites from the very beginning. So we've already established that hue refers to color. And since Adam was made from the dust of the ground, Adam was the first hue man. Since Adam was the first hue man, Adam was a man of color. Now, how do I know? Because there is no white dirt. Not only was Adam a man of color, but Adam was black. How do I know? I'm so glad you asked. Farmers will tell you that the richest dirt is black loam. L-O-A-M, or soil. And like any other artist, God would only use the best. So, whenever you refer to blackness, like black nation of people, you connect with the first original hue man, Adam. And the blacker your skin, the closer you are to the original hue man. So, from this point on, don't let anybody, don't let your family, your friends, your teacher, your coach, your boss, don't let anybody make you ashamed of your dark skin. Because the darker your skin, the closer you are to the original hue man. Now, we have the hue man, and according to God's plan, the opposite of the hue man is the hueless man. Those with color and those without color. Even in the race category, 3 of those are people of color. Scientists and artists alike will tell you that white is the absence of color and black is a mixture of all colors in equal portion. So, we are back to those with color and those without color. Now, we have the hue man. And how did we get the hueless man? Let's go back to the Bible. In Genesis 11:1, it says, the whole earth had one language. If you have one language, you have one people. In fact, in the early records of civilization, very little was known of any activity on the Europe continent. And that activity was only that of the black hue man who migrated out of Africa into Europe and other lands like Australia. Even in the early records of civilization, they show that people have lived on Africa longer than anywhere else in the world. Nova had a very interesting series in which they highlighted the migration of the original human out of Africa to other lands. They also highlighted their mutated genealogy. African DNA was found everywhere. European DNA, none. No European DNA was found south of the Sahara in Africa. Pink Palace, right here in Memphis, also had a race exhibit in which they traced the migration of the original human out of Africa into other lands. Newsweek had an article entitled, The Search for Adam and Eve. And in that article, they traced human variation back to one common ancestor in Africa. So, how did we get the hueless man? God tweaked the DNA of the original human and over thousands of years produced the brown, the red, and the yellow, and culminating in the hueless man. The human Adam with the dominant gene, the hueless with the recessive gene. Blonde and blue-eyed is a recessive gene. So black people, whenever you copulate with the hueless one, you weaken the seed and you pollute the gene pool. Much research went into this week's work, and I hope it not only piqued your interest, but it prompted you to do your own research. My sources were the Bible, world history books and encyclopedia, cultural anthropology, human biology, Newsweek, Pink Palace race exhibit, and of course, Nova. Oh, Nova has such a vivid and informative series. So, how do I know we're opposite? My hair is curly, not straight. My nose is broad, not keen. My lips are thick, not thin. My derriere is round and robust, not flat and wide. And my you know is you know, and so on, and you know the so on. So, Black people, whenever you deny your African heritage, you also give up your spiritual identity. In fact, the very last verse of the 3rd chapter in the Gospel of Luke, Adam is called the Son of God. So if you deny your African heritage, you give up your spiritual identity. So the title of the poem this week is merely Opposites. For every in, there's an out. For every shh, there's a shout. For every up, there's a down. For every smile, there's a frown. For every fat, there's a skinny. For every none, there are many. For every right, there's a wrong. For every verse, there's a song. For every hot, there's a cold. For every timid, there's a bold. For every big, there's a small. For every space, there's a wall. For every good, there's a bad. For every happy, there's a sad. For every beginning, there's an end. For every foe, there's a friend. For every dark, there's a light. For every black, there's a white. And so, fair skin, it's plain to see, I am not the opposite of you, but you are the opposite of me. Salama.